Hi everyone, today I'm excited to have Simon Ooley, who's turning enterprise pricing from a spreadsheet nightmare into competitive weapon. He's the CEO of Veles, and he's building the AI workforce that sits in front of clunky CPQ tools, letting sales reps quote and close without detours. Welcome to the show, Simon. Awesome. So, you've had a very interesting journey, but before you started Veles, how did you get in this crazy world of startups?
Yeah, great question. I started my career how most people start their sales careers, which is as a BDR.
Hmm.
My first real SaaS company that I worked with, I was a BDR, and then I rose the ranks from BDR all the way to head of sales, and then through to starting a company. But about a decade of quota carrying sales rep activity in between then and now.
Interesting. And what led you to start Veles, and how's it different from other CPQ tools?
Yeah, so I didn't actually plan to start Velis. That wasn't like my goal going into my career was to start a company. I always thought that would be really interesting to do, but I felt like I needed to have a really compelling reason to do it. And so while I was a quota carrying sales rep at multiple companies, either via individual contributor or leading sales teams, there was this constant thread that we struggled with as a sales team, which was you had this really big, clunky CPQ product. There's a bunch out there, but think about all the enterprise ones. They are built very specific to generate an order form, manage compliance, and manage rev rec through to kind of what finance is caring about most. But they really left all of the experience and the ability for a sales rep to do their job better. That was just left out of the design of the product. And so what we found as enterprise sales teams was that we were just rebuilding all that logic in a Google spreadsheet or an Excel spreadsheet and doing all pricing and packaging outside of the CPQ, which of course leads to discrepancies between the spreadsheet and the source of truth being your CPQ. And also it just led to a lot of frustration, a lot of admin, a lot of wasted time. And it was really difficult to train any new reps when they came on because it's like, hey, here's how you do this crazy click path in the CPQ, but also here's this spreadsheet and please don't click any cells, but the ones that are highlighted in yellow or else you're going to break it. It was a terrible experience. And so I experienced that as an individual contributor. I left that business, was leading a sales team, found myself building the same spreadsheet I hated as an individual contributor. And so that was the point where I said, hey, this is something we really need to do. Then I moved to one more company, felt that same exact pain. And then I just started doing exploration and figured out actually everybody hates this and everybody has this. And so it was a glaring signal that we had to start Velis because there was nothing else out there to solve it.
As you mentioned, you've been part of other SaaS businesses, and now you're building an AI product. What's the biggest difference that you've noticed when it comes to pricing traditional SaaS products versus AI products now?
Yeah, there's a lot of differences. The big glaring one that everyone will talk about is the margin is not the same. So if you're a AI heavy consumption or usage heavy product, margins are really tight and you have to be super careful about how your sales team interacts and quotes those credits or tokens. I also think maybe a little less obvious, but it's very, very prevalent is the value of your AI products are not very clearly defined by your product and packaging anymore. If you buy any data provider or if you buy any cloud computing business, like you're not buying a package that's well defined with value add messaging in that package. You're just buying a bucket of credits or tokens. And so for a buyer, it's a lot harder to justify the spend for the amount of tokens you're buying or the amount of credits you're buying unless you do all of this work yourself. And so I think there's a really incredible opportunity for businesses to kind of go back to first principles as it relates to selling and sell the outcomes that the buyer is looking to accomplish, not the number of tokens. Because 5,000 tokens or 5 million tokens means nothing to a buyer, but the outcome they get with those tokens means everything. And so that's a huge kind of shift in the way that sellers need to sell when they're thinking about AI products.
You would see a lot of AI companies are experimenting with pricing, but from your perspective, working with enterprise sales teams, what's actually working and what's not working right now?
Yeah, it really depends on the maturity of the business, right? So you can be coming from cloud computing and like
Yeah.
you've been on the credit consumption model for a while. Think about like a Snowflake or a Databricks. They've been selling units for a long time. And so they're incredibly mature as it relates to selling AI because it's
Yeah.
just a shift, but it's a similar way that to sell versus some of the large legacy SaaS companies that we work with that have been packages forever and are now moving closer to consumption. I think what's working the best today, just because it's such a shift in the way that we sell and a shift in the way that we think about opportunity architecture and Salesforce or your CRM as well, is package plus consumption or package plus usage. So, hey, you're going to buy X number of seats plus you get this limit of credits. You can always buy more. As a customer of Apollo for data and for sequencing, I think they're doing it really well. Hey, you can buy, your seat gets X number of credits, X number of numbers, X number of emails, and you can always just buy more. And so I think, if anyone's thinking about how to transition to consumption, it's not a black and white decision. It's not a off and on. It's you can move through the cycles and just start to forecast and estimate and then track what your average user is using from a consumption standpoint, from a usage standpoint, and then model those add-ons and those credits around that.
Got interesting. And you mentioned about the pricing models. I think the hybrid based pricing is really working well. But if you look at C based pricing or usage based pricing, when does each model make sense for an AI product? Do you think like a pure play usage based model would really work?
Yeah, I think you had Marco on the podcast recently. He's definitely the expert. I would lean on him for a lot of the if, when, and where. But I think fundamentally for me, I really always fall back to the concept of what is the customer looking to accomplish. If you have built your pricing model and your product around that outcome, and the more they use the product, the more that outcome is achieved, then consumption and usage is a bullseye. It's exactly what you're looking to accomplish. And so it's not so much do I look at, okay, here's my product, and based on the product I have, these are the pricing models I'm going to use. I really look at building the product with the pricing model in mind and say, if I'm going to develop a product this way, here are the models I have at my disposal, and how do I shape my product and the way that my users consume my product to meet that use case. Because every pricing model has gamification in it. I think we've lived with seat licenses for, I don't know, 2 decades, maybe 15 years. Seat licenses have been pretty big. You could sell 5 seats to a customer and then they can share all the passwords on one password. And then there's 15 people using those 5 seats, right? I think that's happened since, we started selling SaaS. And so whatever pricing model you have, you can gamify it. But I think the closer you get to the desired outcome, the harder it's going to be to gamify and the easier it's going to be to justify that spend. And so when we think about, okay, computing power is a great use case. Everyone's comfortable with buying compute, AWS, GCP. You're going to look at that compute power and say, I'm not going in there looking to spend $50,000. I'm not setting a budget to go, okay, I'm only going to spend $50,000. If you need to compute more to deliver for your customers, you're going to spend more because that's the desired outcome. And so it's really not about the budget as it relates to compute. Obviously you want to, be optimized and not overspend, which you can easily do, but you're going to always be looking for that desired outcome. And so less compute means less of the outcome. More compute means more of the outcome, to the degree that you can actually meet that consumption. And so if anyone's thinking about building a product, think about first and foremost what the outcome your customer is going to get, and then figure out how you model pricing around the more of that outcome, the more they pay for, the more the ROI. So everything goes in that hockey stick graph. Pricing, obviously margin ideally goes up as they buy more, but then ROI goes up, their outcomes, everything is going in that direction. And that's how you build that virality and that scale as a business.
And Simon, you mentioned that AI compute cost are variable and they are actually unpredictable. But how should founders think about pricing when their cost of goods sold, which includes the service being delivered to the customers, can swing wildly from month to month?
Yeah, well, it's hard. Of course, I think you need to work on 2 axes, and I think there's a concept that I think came out of Harvard, one of their papers, and YC has taught it as well in their curriculum, which is the pricing thermometer, right? So the top, like there's always going to be a delta between your cost and the value the customer perceives, and then your cost and the cost of your product, and the delta between the cost and your price is what you earn. The delta between your cost and the value they perceive is what they earn, right? And so you can move that cost around within that thermometer, but if you make it too high, your customer's not going to perceive enough value. They're not going to buy, even though you could be making a lot more money. You need to find that optimal spacing. And so as it relates to volatility, you have to model that into your costs. And you need to know that on the high swings of that volatility, that you're not in the red, of course. And ideally, you're not, breaking even either. You have some type of buffer that's going to make sense. And then, in the short term, you can't do too much forecasting to say this is what my revenue is. But if you project it out long enough, you should be able to understand over a 12-month period, looking at historic volatility of whatever my costs are, you should be able to model that out with some degree of accuracy, right? You're not going to be within 5%, 5 points, but you need to be clear that worst case scenario, you're not going to be spending more than you make.
Right. And earlier you mentioned like it's like packaging and pricing not the only differentiator, but how do you actually recommend, how do you package AI products? Is there any right framework for listeners who want to understand it more?
Yeah, I think so. I think I might stand alone on this or stand with few because it's so new. But I think of a concept of use case based sales. Use case based sales takes into account all the old sales methodologies, the medics, the Sandler selling, like all of those things you can incorporate into this. You're just reframing your product and packaging to the use case that the customer is looking to buy. And so use case based sales is, I'm not selling you my product or package, I'm selling you this desired outcome. And so when a customer comes to you, they say, hey, I'm looking to route inbound leads more effectively because we're not catching all of them and we could be making more money. Okay, that is a fantastic use case. Let's build a model around that use case. And so you could go down the ROI track with that use case. You can go down the credit estimation track with that use case. You can build an incredible business case for that use case. And it's just one subset of the things you could do with that customer, right? So if you're an N8N or a Make or some type of, workflow building product, right? Even just AI or open AI agents that they have now, like it's almost impossible to tell one person what that product does for them because it could do anything, right? It could literally do any workflow for any department within that business. And so really kind of coming back to first principles and saying, what are you looking to accomplish? Let's identify that as a use case. Let's model out the cost, benefit, and ROI of that specific use case. And then it's irrefutable. To accomplish that use case, it's X number of credits or tokens. And the tokens are just an ancillary, currency. It's not something that is like our core package deliverable. You're not buying a package that has X number of credits. You're buying the outcome of this use case. And to do that, we need to invest in this number of credits. And so I always love to do that with our customers that are using Veles, but our customers use Veles to help do this with their businesses, which is you should be stack ranking every use case a business wants to accomplish with you, prioritizing them, figuring out what are important to buy now versus later, and really focus on delivering on those top use cases. It's the best way for you to build rapport with your customers, to become a trusted partner. And then also any use cases that you've modeled out with them that they want to accomplish that aren't top of mind right now is the clearest path to white space upsell and cross-selling in the future.
Super interesting. I like the case-based, sales framework. Since I come from the revenue side of the business. When the comp structure for seat-based pricing had been there for last 15 odd years. But what do you think should be the comp structure for salespeople for usage-based pricing? How should they be able to, especially sales leaders who are listening to this podcast?
Yeah, if you stay in the traditional framework that everyone's used to today, which is just new logo versus renewals versus upsell, you segment out those teams, it becomes a lot harder to justify compensation for consumption models because consumption models kind of by default are going to lead you towards land and expand transactions. You're going to start with one or two use cases. You're going to deliver on those. You're going to build trust. You're going to, land a few more use cases that they want to accomplish. And so I think you really need to take the enterprise lens of sales here and say, okay, my enterprise sellers are going to own these accounts. These accounts have an upside value that we're looking to get towards, but every quarter they should be working with those accounts, modeling out use cases, modeling out ways to increase consumption, right? And then you should be compensating them on the consumption growth. And also, like, I think, again, I always come back to like the Snowflake Databricks models because I think they just do it really well, candidly, which is you're going to constantly work with them, build out new use cases, land those use cases, see how they perform. And you kind of look at it on a monthly or quarterly basis to say, how much consumption growth did we get from last month? And then you can compensate on that. Or you can do it, you can kind of span it out to quarters, span it out to biannual if you want. But I think that like whatever cadence that you look at consumption growth, you should really be looking at how did these reps grow consumption on a percentage basis per quarter, per year, biannually. But if you can tie consumption or you can tie compensation of your reps to consumption growth within an account, it's going to like set everybody on the same path. Everyone aligns towards business growth. And at every level from the individual contributor to the CEO, everyone's working in the same direction. And I think that's something that we've actually missed a lot with traditional SaaS. Traditional SaaS is new logo, bang, I'm just going to throw this deal in, throw the grenade over the fence to customer success in some cases, unfortunately. And that pays out the individual contributor, but it doesn't pay out the business in the long term, right? But now that we're moving in this consumption, I think it's aligning everybody to the path we should be on.
Very, very interesting. And if you look at AI products, they seem to have this free tier for PLG motion, but it's also very expensive to serve. So where do you think the economics of the freemium model would that still serve in AI products?
I think so, and I think so for the kind of the singular point, which is AI products there are so many AI products in every space right now. It's just if you want anything, you can find 5 or 6 companies that do it, and so you're not going to win the market on like my AI product is cheaper than the other AI product. I think, that's a race to the bottom and nobody wants to be in it. It's all going to come back to user experience and the delight features and the way that you interact and the way that you teach users to use your product more effectively. Again, all kind of tying back to more use cases, more deliverables, like get you more comfortable with the product. But freemium is it plays a crucial role in that quick path to like winning them over. So if you make it difficult for a business to even sign up with your product, they've already tested 3 other businesses. Like they've already tested 3 other companies. And they could like those or not, but they've gotten the shot before you have. And so, I think there's a few products on the market that are really helping startups test the freemium model. I think Schematic is a fantastic example. I think their website's schematichq.com, but an incredible way to test freemium models and credit burn downs so you can really set the caps on AI usage. And the second they hit that usage, you can obviously trigger that upsell. And so I think that being really conscious about how you treat freemium models and how you kind of put your glass ceiling on those freemium models is going to be more important than ever because if you just let a freemium model go wild, your credit costs are going to explode and you're not going to be able to cover that margin.
Right. Interesting. And should customers see those? Should we be transparent about the token coins, the API usage, the compute time, or should we abstract that away?
It's a difficult question because I think there's a place for transparency. One, I think that any technical user or savvy user in AI knows the cost of every token. There's a bunch of great free calculators online comparing Anthropic to OpenAI or Gemini. What I find difficult about the transparency piece is that no one use case is the same. And so even if we had one token value in a sales scenario, and automating inbound lead creation and demo scheduling was weighed against outbound messaging. Like every token spent on inbound is drastically more valuable than every token spent on outbound because somebody who's coming into your website is already kind of rearing to go. And so you don't want to miss the opportunity to schedule an inbound demo, whereas you're manifesting outbound demo creation, right? So you're meeting somebody at a different part of the funnel. And I think, abstract away from the inbound, outbound, if you were just to say, I'm going to automate this task internally at my business versus this task. If one task is in finance and it has to do with revenue recognition and it could mean, compliance standard being met or lost, I think that's more valuable than I'm just going to automate some tasks and populate some Salesforce fields. And so from that lens, I think it's super important to focus on the outcomes and the value you're creating from those outcomes and move away from kind of like a cost plus model, because the more businesses stay in that frame of thinking, the easier it's going to be for everybody using AI to commoditize down to like racing to the cheapest possible margin. And I don't think that's where AI wins. I think it wins on the outcomes that it's going to deliver for people, the work it's going to do for the individuals. And I think that can only be weighed against like the way they're doing it now, right? So like, how much money are we going to save you? How much time are we going to give you? That's the important thing to measure the cost of your credits against, not the cost of the credit to whatever provider.
Right. And we talked about pricing, but how do you go about packaging when you're saying to, Fortune 500 versus a 50% startup?
As it relates to packaging credits and,
Yeah.
and tokens.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's always valuable to have some type of basic package. So I will always frame this as use cases, because I think
Yeah.
use cases are always going to be the center line that you drive sales motions around moving forward in consumption. I might be a bit early on this, but I do feel like use cases are going to be the crux of how we sell in an AI age. But I think it's always valuable, first and foremost, on your website to say like, hey, most of our customers buy this kind of makeup of consumption from us. Maybe that's saying, trying to use an example, like maybe that's saying AI data provider, most companies in the startup space will buy 50,000 credits to accomplish this use case, this use case, this use case. Most companies in the enterprise will spend 5 million credits to accomplish this use case, this use case, this use case. If you want to move forward with that package, great. You have your PLG motion, you have your set boundaries on credit consumption. Awesome. But the packages are not about the feature flags and the kind of like predefined outcomes. It's more about, hey, this is why people buy it. Here are the use cases they look to accomplish, not the features and functionality. And so I think it's just easy to forget as you build a product. Oh, this new feature is going to be awesome. I want to tell people about this new feature. And it's sometimes really hard to think about, okay, what does this feature do for our customer and why would they buy the feature? Not that it's cool. I know it's cool. When we build new products, I get super excited to tell people, but I have to like stop myself and say, why does somebody want to buy that? And then that's what I should be communicating on our website and in our sales motion, not the fact that we have the feature itself.
Correct. Yeah, no, absolutely. 2025 been crazy. I mean, you've seen OpenAI GPT-4 input units drop by 90%. Anthropic is competing on value. Also have DeepSeek, which was able to undercut everyone by 80%. But how do AI companies build that sustainable pricing strategies when, the foundation model costs keep falling this fast and you don't know how it's going to pan out in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, I think there's two approaches, which is one kind of what I had alluded to before, which was focus on the value you're providing. Make sure your margin for cost is aligning with your financial model, but essentially don't do cost plus, right? So focus on the value. That way, as model costs drop, your margin increases. You get a little closer to traditional SaaS. I mean, ideally, you're shooting for 60 to 80% margin. We're so far away from that in the AI space today, but that's what we're shooting for. And then second is, I think there's always the opportunity to allow users to bring their own API keys and their own consumption. And you do end up being able to kind of mark up that cost on top. So you're still providing the service, you're still providing the value, but you're just allowing them to pay for the credit consumption costs. And then you have to do a separate model of how does that make sense for you and what's the financial metrics that we're looking to hit if we're not the de facto credit and we're more facilitating them via like their APIs.
Got it. And where do you think the AI pricing is headed? Do you think it's going to be the future of hybrid-based pricing 5 years or 10 years down the line? Where do you see a further evolution of pricing from now?
I think that we're going to move, well, I think it's going to depend on the type of business that you are. And that's a super lame answer, I know. But I think that most businesses will move more towards the fully consumption based pricing model. And I think that the businesses that are going to have a hard time doing that are going to be the ones that also incorporate hardware and heavy implementation costs. You have to cover that from a white glove enterprise solution standpoint. You can't just implement for 6 figures and then just hope consumption's going to be able to recoup that cost. So I think there's going to be a shift for the enterprise. They're going to try to move towards consumption, but there's going to be upfront cost and there's going to be larger commitments as it relates to consumption. And so it's going to be more important than ever to really be modeling the right use cases for a business and know that you have the forecasted consumption needed to cover your costs as it relates to the partnership. And then for everyone else, I think you're going to have to be smarter, candidly, and focus more on how do you make your product self-service to the degree that you don't have to invest so much human capital and time into training and implementing the product. If you're as easy to use as LinkedIn or Gmail or something like that, it's intuitive. No, I've never spoken to anyone at LinkedIn about using LinkedIn. I've definitely spoken to a lot of people at LinkedIn, or I've never spoken to anyone at Google about using Gmail. If you can make your product as easy to use as that, then consumption is going to be the best thing for you, because not only are you going to be able to drive more usage through your own app, but it's going to be incredibly easy for people to start and just test. And I think that's the best place to be from a consumption model. Compelling reason to start, easy to adopt, and clear kind of channels to more growth and more value. And I think everyone's moving in that direction. It's very, very difficult to get there, but I think in 5-10 years, most companies are going to be on that model. And then the enterprise is obviously going to be kind of moving in that direction, but still a little heavy upfront time and implementation fees, and then ongoing consumption models after that.
Right. And, before the call, we talked about how you're part of the YC program, right? And what I've seen is like YC is still one of the strongest accelerator and funds over there, with a very high hit rate of, companies moving to seed stage and series A, and a lot of them are unicorns. But what's been the value of the YC network, and, what suggestion would you give to people about, what was your experience when you did the YC program?
Yeah, well, if there's one thing you take away from this is definitely apply, definitely try to join. It's incredibly valuable, not just for people coming out of college. I think there's this aura of like, if you are in MIT or you're a junior or senior in college, applying to YC is the best thing ever. I do actually think it is, because the level of understanding in the market they have and the years of experience they have are going to teach you so much about what real life is like. I went into YC after a decade of being in the industry. And so a lot of it was like, yeah, you guys are spot on. I know this, but thank you for so much for nailing it into me. But then also they taught me so much more about just fundamental founder lessons that you only learn by like failing and doing that. And so a lot of the group partners are so honest about their journeys. Not all of them had smash successes. Like, a lot of them built companies and they were fantastic. And then, it didn't quite pan out the way they wanted to. And so you're able to learn kind of every level of success, from like full out failure, which there's so many lessons there. What happens and what are you shooting for? What are the goals? And then, obviously the smash successes are amazing. In my batch, there's like Legora and Delve, and they've just basically, exploded since the batch ended. And I'm super excited. I'm so pumped to be able to follow their journeys. And so I think like YC fundamentally is at the front end, the frontier of not only AI growth, but there's something valuable about having that network in Silicon Valley that you're not going to get anywhere else. If you need to talk to somebody, you want to hear from somebody, the best way to do it is to go through YC as a YC alum. So super grateful I had the chance to do it. And I think anybody who's thinking about starting a company should pressure test their idea against a YC application. And, YC is going to say no to 99% of people that apply, but they also give you like incredible feedback. They spend so much time reviewing applications and being thoughtful, even if you get rejected. And so I say pressure test your idea against YC, regardless if you're going to join or not. It's a worthwhile effort.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love this. And, if a founder is listening to this and they need to set, pricing for the AI product, what's one framework or principle that you would tell them to start with?
So, fear of turning into a broken record, I would say think about the use case you're looking to accomplish with your customer. What product, first, what product are you building and why? The why should be, you know, at least include a handful of use cases for your business. You're feeling this pain, your customers feel this pain. Let's dive deep into that pain and understand the willingness to pay. So, is that pain so detrimental that they will give you $50 right now to solve it, or $100 right now to solve it? And are they willing to spend thousands of dollars with you a year to ensure that pain never comes back? If so, you should be able to have candid conversations with them and say, hey, how much is this worth solving? I'll point to the CEO of Schematic again. He has a great talk on willingness to pay. I'll see if I can share one of the links with you afterwards so you can share it with everybody. First, if you're thinking about pricing your product, simplicity is key, probably number one. Number two, focus on the desired outcome that you're looking to solve for your customer, and have candid conversations about how much that use case is worth. And then everything else should just kind of reverse engineered off the back of that. And so make sure your obviously your margin is comfortable, but at the end of the day, what are you solving for them and how can we simply describe it? You're going to be in a really good place and probably better than most startups when they start, if you can answer those two questions.
What's the first thing you check in the morning? Is it a Slack or email?
The first thing I check in the morning is email.
Email. Okay.
Unfortunately, I should.
Is there one thing about startups which you were not prepared for, but after you did it, it came as a surprise to you?
The first thing that comes to mind is I was not prepared for how many features my customers would ask for that were not actually what was solving the desired outcome they had. It's a long story short, but I think whenever you're building a product, someone thinks something's really cool. There was a scenario where I built one or two of those things and they're like, and I was like, I thought maybe that product feature requests would be more baked, but that was something I didn't expect when I started a company.
And is there any bad or good habit that you picked up after becoming a founder?
In the first 12 months full time on the business, the bad habit was having no balance whatsoever in my life. Worked probably 80 to 90 hours a week. And the remaining time was spent with my family and absolute zero time for me whatsoever. And so the good habit in the second year of our business is that we become a little bit more balanced. I actually do exercise for, still probably could do more, but be careful whenever you start a startup that you don't just get engrossed in it to the degree that you don't take care of yourself, because it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, absolutely love it. And do you have a product which is not Veles, which you secretly admire?
Another company that I greatly admire. Maybe not any one product, but I really respect companies that do one thing incredibly and refuse to do anything else. I think about there's a product we just use their API to accomplish one thing, and they just do it so well, and they're opinionated about it. I think that's just such a fantastic thing to be. It's just to be so focused on delivering value in the thing you care about and not try and be everything for everybody.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Apple in the last 50 years just has 4 or 5 products and it's like $1 trillion company. So
Yeah, you can do it.
Yeah. And what helps you reset when, things get overwhelming? Yeah. Is there anything which helps you, calm you down or makes you less anxious?
Yeah. Recently it's been endurance sports. I don't have a lot of extra time. Still, I have a family and a startup that does take up 95% of my week. But I recently got a trainer for my bike that I can ride it inside. And so you might find me at like 9 p.m. sweating in my office with my bike trainer. I think that's just been an incredible mental health break whenever you're overwhelmed or feeling bogged down. Just getting it out via exercise is one of the best ways to do it.
Correct. Well put. Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll put that in the show notes. And Simon, what's the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Veles?
Yeah, if anyone's looking for a modern CPQ product that's going to help them not only sell AI, but also just improve the way their sellers engage with pricing, we'd be more than happy to talk to anybody. Our website is www.getvelis.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, quite active there. And we're more than happy to explore if we can help pricing and packaging in this new AI age.
Awesome. We'll put that in show notes. Simon, thank you so much for taking your time speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great talking to you.